Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Poddin My Noggin. This week we are joined by a guest named Bill Lee Emery. He is a cancer survivor and has worked in the field of mindfulness and just overall mental health for 40 plus years. Bill, welcome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for being.
Thank you.
For everyone who's listening, Bill is located in Brisbane, Australia.
Just south of Brisbane, it's called the Gold Coast in Queensland, and I live in an eco village, an award-winning eco village in a place called the Currumbin Valley.
So an eco village, it's like something off the grid.
Yeah, well, not quite entirely off the grid. We all have rainwater tanks. We don't have, there are no dogs or cats here because we have lots of wildlife. We have kangaroos hanging out in our garden. We have a platypus that comes to the creek, which is just a few minutes over there. We have all kinds of iconic Australian wildlife. So dogs and cats don't fit in with that. We do a lot of recycling here. We have community gardens. We have a community hall. We have a swimming pool. We have a gym. We have a library. We have such a lovely community, although there's always a few weirdos. I mean, you put a bunch of human beings together, not everyone's going to get happy, but that's okay.
No, that's fair. And it sounds like almost like a eco village, but with a conservationist mentality.
Yeah, very much, very much. Yeah, that's true. Most people that come to live here because they don't want to live a normal suburban life. They want to live in a place that has more environmental values, and that's how it's been set up. So anyway, that's where I live.
When we first exchanged comments and notes and that sort of thing, and reading your story, I was really fascinated with what you've done with your life so far, and then what has happened to you. Let's talk about that.
How far back do you want me to go?
Well, we can talk about what got you into the world of mindfulness and brain training, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So, like many people, I fell into a job and a career almost by accident. I was working in the computer industry. This is in England originally, but then in Australia. And so what often happened back in those days is you weren't actually given a lot of training. You're often just pushed into the job. So I'm working computers, and there was one job that I had where I was probably undertrained and not given the responsibility or the power to do what I needed to do. So I would wake up with a knot in my stomach and go to bed with a knot in my stomach. And I read when you had a change of job, when your package was delivered to you, you had an opportunity to go, well, what do I do now? And so I was faced with, what do I do now? If I keep on going down this path, it's going to kill me. I'm going to get an ulcer. It's got to be something better than this. And so I went on a kind of a journey of what do I really want to do? And I stumbled into a course on hypnosis. And hypnosis is something I've been interested in since I was like 12 years of age. So I did this course in hypnosis and was able to use it clinically with some friends and with some other people. That led to learning about a model called transactional analysis and Gestalt therapy, which comes from the 1960s, 1970s. From that, it came to studying NLP, which is quite well known these days. And I started to run programs on learning because that came just in front of me. Someone said, here, there's a book called Super Learning, and there's someone's doing some training on it. I'm going, wow, far out, let's go do that. So I started to do public programs. And some of the people in the audience were from the corporate world. and they would say to me, hey, listen, can you come and train my team in this X, Y, and Z? So the doors were opening, and I'm just kind of following the pathway. From there, I was working with a friend of mine, a kinesiologist. This was 30 years ago, when kinesiology was very young in Australia. And we got together and we did some programs combining what I know about accelerated learning and what he knew about kinesiology. And it was a brilliant partnership. It was one of those, he's my best buddy. Even after all the years we don't work together, but he's just my best buddy. He can put on an Irish accent and tell the most outrageous jokes. If you want someone that tells good Irish jokes, get him on your show. Anyway, so we're doing this together. And then we got a phone call from the coach of the national skydiving team. So he had heard us on a radio interview. And he said, well, you guys sound pretty interesting. You want to come and train with us? Now, we'd never worked with elite athletes before. So we had an opportunity to go work with the Australian National Skydive. And coincidentally, just before that, the Christmas before that, I was at a party and a friend of mine was telling me when they did a skydive. And I'm going, wow, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to do that. In January, a month later, we get an invite from the coach of the national skydiving team to go train with them. And the deal was, we'll suck your brains and you teach us all that we know. And in return, we'll throw you out of an aeroplane at 16 feet. And we did 14 jumps in 10 days. We did 5 in one day, 3 before lunch. And my adrenals, my nervous system was just shot. But these guys were so much fun. They were crazy. Like one of the photographers, so they're in formation and they come down at incredible speed and they have a photographer videoing what they do because they're in competition and they're fine-tuning what they do. The photographer would get bored. So you have 2 chutes, a main chute and a reserve emergency chute. So he would pack, because you pack your own parachute, he would pack his main chute, not every time, but every now and again. He'd pack it to fail. So he's coming down, he's done his job. He opens the chute, it fails. Now he has to use his emergency chute. So he would do this because he was just bored, having done this so many times. He just wanted a little bit more adrenaline. They used to play a game called chicken. Now for us, we have what's called an automatic opening device, AOD. And at 3,000 feet, it would open your chute no matter what. They don't, because they don't. But they would come down. And chicken was whoever could last the longest before opening your chute. So they might be 100 feet off the ground and then they open up the chute. They were nuts. They were crazy. But we learned a lot about what happens when you're at that elite level. I mean, physically you have to have everything in place. But the thing that you have to have in your place is your head. You cannot afford to be slack. You have to be very precise, especially when you're doing precision work. And you have to have very clear, and I'll come back to this again, mental boundaries about what you let into your head. Okay. So that was a wonderful experience. And then I've also worked with triathletes, world-class, like world champion triathletes. And again, their level of physical fitness is like, 2 people, you can't tell them apart. But what they do mentally inside their head is a thing that makes a difference. So I was learning a lot. And golfers, I mean, if there are any golfers watching this, what people do in their head, you're at the first tee, there's a group of people around watching you, and you know where you're going, you see where you want. But the last thing you say to yourself is, oh, look out for the bunker, or look out for the pond over there. And if that's the last thing your body gets, it goes, okay, well, he did say over there, but now he wants to go into the bunker. And so the ball will inevitably be in the bunker or in the pond. And the person's going, duh, I knew I was going to do that. So my point around that is you have to give your mind the instruction of what you want, not what you don't want. Now, this is, it might sound very obvious, but unless you develop it as a skill with absolute precision and boundaries, it's so easy to deliver something else than what you want. So as a coach and as a therapist, when I'm working with people and I say, so what are you here for? What would you like? And say, well, I don't want to feel anxious anymore. Okay, and what else? Well, I don't want to feel depressed. And I don't want to feel this. And I hear what you don't want, but I haven't heard what you do want. So focus and attention is absolutely critical. Also, I'm learning all these skills. I'm working with people in business and have to focus their attention. I'm working with golfers, athletes, triathletes, and I'm learning a lot of things. I'm learning about precision in the work that I do mentally. I'm also learning and teaching how to be emotionally resilient, of how, when we talked about fear or fearing, this might be a good time to talk about that now. So we have four basic emotions: anger, fear, sadness, and joy. So anger is the emotion that tells us there's some kind of injustice or our boundaries are being crossed. And we need to have that energy of going, don't do that anymore, get off my feet, stop haranguing me, whatever it might be. We need to be able to generate anger. But some people have what's called an anger racket. In other words, no matter what's happening in their life, they will find ways to be angry because they have an existential position that life is not fair. And if it isn't fair, then it's reasonable that you want to get angry about it not being fair. So they will make their world an angry place to be, even if it's peace and calm. So then there's sadness, and sadness is actually a beautiful emotion. Sadness is the emotion that helps us go through the transitions in life. And sadness is all about accepting that things change. That's what its purpose is. And now, sadness and grief has its own timetable, as everyone knows. You can't go, well, I'm just going to be sad for a week, then I'm over and done. No. And we can be sad about anything: the change of a job, the change of a relationship, moving from one place to another, the death of someone, or some other tragedy. But it's all about transition. Then we come to fear, and there are two kinds of fear. One is a kind of fear which keeps you alive. Like when I was a kid and, I had a Superman cape. And if I went to the top of the roof of a house and jumped off, I probably wouldn't be here. So we need a certain amount of fear to keep us from doing dumbass, stupid things. You get your hand near a fire and you pull it away, and that's telling you what you're about to do is dangerous, so you need some fear. So that's useful. But the other fear, the one that does more damage than any other thing that I've come across, is the imaginary fear. I remember when I'm a teenager, I'm at a dance. I see a pretty girl, I want to go dance. So I go walking towards her, and then halfway across the dance floor, and all my mates are over here, and this is what happens in England and Australia. I'm sure it happens in Canada too. All my mates are over here. I see this pretty girl. Halfway across the dance floor, I stop and turn around. What's happening halfway through? I'll tell you what's happening. I'm having a dialogue with myself that says, she won't dance with you, she's too pretty. You're an ugly son of a bitch, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to look a fool. And so my own internal dialogue makes me turn around, and I rue the day of all the gorgeous girls I could have danced with if I hadn't had my head so messed up. So let's talk about fearing. And this is an idea which is maybe different from how most people take fear on board. So for a lot of people, fear is just something that happens to you. But let me draw it out. Let's say this is me being scared. Before I can be scared, something has to happen, either internally or externally. There's some trigger, some stimulus that I respond to. And it's the way that I respond will either create fear or something else. Now, I'm going to come back to that, but I want to mention the last emotion, and that is joy. So let me ask you, why do you figure we have joy as human beings? What do you reckon we have joy? And your listeners can answer this in their own head too. So what do you think we have joy? What's the purpose of joy?
For me, I think my truth with joy is that joy exists in conjunction with sadness, right?
Yes,
So
yes,
there's
yes, yes.
two opposite ends of that scale, but you can't have
Yep,
one without the other.
yep,
So joy is the opposite of sadness, but it can exist within sadness just as sadness can exist within joy.
Yeah.
That's my truth.
Okay. So, but why do we need joy? What does it do for us?
Well, I would imagine that life would not be so enjoyable if you
It would
didn't
suck
have
if we
joy.
didn't
Yeah.
use it. And the reason is this, and you're right, there is often a contrast between sadness and joy. And part of sadness is its ability to take us through the transition from how life was to how life is now. So someone
Hmm.
dies, for example, they were in your life, they were a source of joy, and now they're no longer there. Sadness is helping us emotionally deal with that and accept the person is gone and we're still alive. And joy often will come after sadness and grief at some stage. And what joy is saying to us. For example, today here in Australia is Valentine's Day. And so there are a lot of, commercial people are getting on board. This is a big business, cards, chocolates, flowers, whatever. And so let's say you're with someone and you experience a lot of joy with that person. Joy is telling you that you're in the right place doing the right thing. It's telling you you're on track. When I was in a job that was killing me, there was no joy at all. When I left and when I found something that lit my heart up, what I experienced is a lot of joy. That's my heart saying, Bill, keep on doing what you're doing in the same way and you will have more of this experience. So joy is telling us that we're on the right track. Make sense?
It does actually, sort of like a compass,
Yeah,
letting us
yeah,
know that
indeed.
we're in that. And it's interesting because I don't think I had thought about joy as directional
Ah,
before,
yeah,
in a sense that, because I think there's a lot of like chasing happiness sort of type things, and where I am in life is that I chase life as it presents itself in the day, right? Now, obviously, days that have joy or happiness feel great, and I have way more of those since I've experienced great loss. Yes, at 35. If you've listened to the podcast prior to this, then I've talked about that. But what resonates with what you just said is what I'm doing right now. So I wasn't necessarily sad, in my corporate job,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I wasn't really experiencing joy
yeah,
either. And then now I'm getting to talk to incredible human beings such as yourself, and it it literally fills my cup in ways I
indeed,
can't explain.
indeed. Yeah. And
So,
so for me, when I first came across this concept, I'm going, well, a lot of people chase happiness. For me, where I am now is I would rather have something that I'm challenged by, something that helps me grow, something that fills up my heart, but also not just my heart, but also my head. So one of the
mm,
coaching modalities I work with aligns our head intelligence with our heart intelligence and our gut brain intelligence. And the best decisions that we make as human beings are when all three have the green light. When all three align, that's when every part of us becomes alive. So intellectually, um, we our brain needs something to do. It needs a game worth playing. It gets bored by mundane. It's not challenging. It's not interesting. It's like, oh, who cares? Who gives a shit? Give me something interesting to get my teeth into, and I'll be there and I'll be fascinated by it. But interesting enough, when someone is standing correctly posturally, their heart is slightly ahead of their head. So we are designed biologically, structurally, to lead from our heart. And within our heart is held our core values, the things that are deeply important to us. Now, for a lot of people, they never go down that path of what's deeply important until some adversity or some crisis comes along and just knocks them off their wherever they're sitting on and puts their eyes on the ground and says, you better look at what's really important because you're missing it. So somehow our human spirit or whatever you like to call it goes, you know, you're just going into a nothingness life. Have this slap across the face. Find out what's really important and then go follow that. So when people, come into their heart and go, well, what really is important to me? 9/11 is a world-changing event. And what happened for a lot of people is they really came back to, I thought chasing the cars, Lamborghinis, the houses, the helicopters, all the material things is what I was supposed to do. But what I really want to do is to hug my child, is to hug my partner and tell them that I love them rather than chasing all the material things, which is very gut-brain oriented, by the way. When we overconsume, it's a very gut-brain thing. But when we follow our heart, that's when we become more alive. When there's a spark in our eyes, there's something challenging to do, and we want to do it. It's not that we have to do it, we want to do it. It's like we get really connected to that. So let me circle back to fear. When I was a kid and there was something horrible going on at school, maybe I was being bullied or maybe I hadn't done my maths homework or whatever it might be, I would wake up in the morning and I'd have a knot in my stomach. And I'd complain to my mum, my tummy hurts, I feel so strong. And so if I did the convincing enough job, I'd get away with it and I wouldn't have to go to school that day. So I learned a couple here in my body, I get away with stuff. Now, in the same way, maybe I didn't get my homework done. But if my approach had been, I'm not going to get, caned, I'm not going to get yelled at because my teacher's very kind and compassionate, I wouldn't have to do fearing. So fear is something that we do. It's a process. And if we can pick the very first trigger that leads to our response and challenge that response. If we don't challenge it, then we just go down. It's like a snowball. You'll be familiar with snowballs. We have a lot more snowballs in Canada than we do here in Australia. Ours tend to melt. So at the top of the hill, you have a little snowball and it gains momentum. But if right when it starts, you pick it up and you start in the opposite direction, it won't become this big, huge snowball or avalanche. So if you pick something early on and challenge it, then we don't get to the end result, which might be panic attacks. So when I'm working with someone that's having a panic attack, I'll ask them, how do you do your panic attacking? And I use that language with the ing, and they go, what do you mean? It just happened to me. Yeah, but before it happened to you, what do you do on the inside of you that leads to this? And it's hard because what it means is you've got to go inside, reflect, have some awareness, and pull it apart. Now, I've done a lot of public speaking. I've been on radio, national TV in Australia. I've spoken in front of thousands of people. But my very first experience of public speaking, I don't often get to talk about this, so thank you for the opportunity, was my very first in New Zealand where I was born. So my parents wanted me to be an independent little boy. So they dropped me at the front of the class and said, there's your classroom, go for it. And as it happens in New Zealand, it often rains. So it starts pouring with rain. I'm standing here with my raincoat on, going, what do I do? And another girl is deposited next to me, and her parents obviously want her to be an independent little girl. So we're both kind of looking at each other going, anyway, the teacher sees us. His name is Mr. Silver. Well, I doubt if he's alive anymore. He sees us and he says, well, come on in. And so we come on in. Now, the kids have been there, the other kids, for 10 minutes. They own the space. They've been there for 10 minutes. We've just arrived. So we take off our coats and we hang them up the back and we sit at the back of the classroom on the floor. And so Mr. Silver turns to us, this little girl and myself, and says, so what are your names? And he's a really lovely... So I'm sitting in the back of the classroom in a totally unknown environment. And all these faces turn around and look at me. And now I'm under the headlights and I have to say who I am. And I just burst out crying. So this was my first utterance as a public speaker, my very first day at school. So when it came around, when I knew in my heart that I was going to be doing public speaking, it was not exactly something I'd prepared myself for. I had to do a lot of overcoming that. What am I going to look like? What am I going to think? All the rest of that stuff. So fear or depression. Let me talk about depression because this is just as common as anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to experience depression, it might sound kind of a weird way of framing it, but if I want to experience depression, before I get to feel depressed, heavy, lethargic, walking like treacle, etc., there are things that I must say to myself about how I am or how life is. And if I want to do a good job, I won't just pick one thing. I'll pick all the things in my life that have never worked and are never going to work in my life. And I'll make that bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'll diminish any resources that I have. If I do those two things, I will end up feeling depressed.
It kind of, that very much lines up with my experience and my belief is that apart from, clinical diagnosis, because there's the brain activity and chemicals,
Yeah,
everything that we experience is based off our internal dialogue and how we process information internally.
yeah,
And so you're talking about fear of speaking publicly.
yeah,
I'm a person, right? I could tell you tons of stories where just even having to speak in front of a small group of people at work was the most vomit-inducing experience I've ever had to go through. But, repeated exposure and then resiliency toolkit, like looking back and saying, hey, wait a second, you've done this on like 5, 6 times, and none of these terrible things that you thought were going to happen ever happened.
yeah,
So let's calm down and go in and do our best. And the same thing with depression, right? When it comes to that, I've spoken about this before. My internal dialogue prior to turning 35 years old was a dumpster fire. It was an awful, horrible place to live. And the stuff that I said to myself or how I reacted to things that I did, I would never say to another living being.
yeah,
And it took a great deal of cognitive restructuring on my part to
yeah.
go in and literally catch thoughts on the daily and then change them to at least be neutral, positive if I could. And
Yeah.
that repetition over time changed me from being a negative, depressed person to a positive, happy person. So that resonates with me.
And that takes time. It takes training. It takes discipline. It takes perseverance. It takes a desire for something better than the crap and the shit that we're giving ourselves. And
Yeah.
it comes to, the common word that's used these days is agency. It gives us agency over ourselves. And if we don't take that responsibility, then we can get pushed every way and become a victim of how the world is, rather than going, well, what's my part in it? So when I first got my cancer diagnosis, so what happened was I was actually at a men's gathering. I go a couple of times a year and I present workshops. And this year I was presenting 2 workshops. And it was on the Friday night, goes for the whole weekend. And I could feel a little lump here. I'm going, oh, that's unusual. But I didn't have time. I was too busy, presenting and talking and connecting, etc. But later when I came home, I'm going, that's hard. Anyway, so I thought maybe it's just a lymph node. So I waited 2 weeks just to check. Then it was still there, so I checked with my doctor. That led to a whole series of tests, which led to the diagnosis of it's actually throat cancer. It's right here. This was, if you like, my early warning signal that led me to realize there was something here. So the first thing that I had to do, so all the way along, okay, little lump, another test, another test, another test, another test, cancer. So all the way along, I've got an opportunity for my imagination to go crazy.
Yeah.
But I'm disciplined. So I wasn't going to do a whole bunch of fearing and stress my adrenals, my kidneys, my nervous system in preparation for something that may not happen. So my training and working with elite athletes was so valuable And when I got my diagnosis, I knew I had to be very careful and mindful and conscious about how I framed up my whole experience. So to put it in very simple terms, this could either be a curse or a blessing. And that was a basic choice. Well, it wasn't going to be a curse. I was going to make it a blessing. I had no idea what that was going to look like, feel like, sound like, turn out to be. But that's a core decision I made. This is going to be a blessing. And from that, a whole variety of other decisions and boundaries I created to keep myself safe. So one of those boundaries, and I'm really clear about boundaries, and this I've learned over many, many years. But I remember going into a chemist and I had to get some stuff because my mouth gets very dry because my salivary glands just get dry. So I go and I asked the person I knew, oh, this, and she said, oh, so what do you want it for? You've got a sore throat. I said, no, I've just had a cancer diagnosis. And she said, oh, gosh, that's terrible. I said, no, it's not terrible. It's curable and I can deal with it. And she went, oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. So what often happens is people will have their own story around cancer, and out of their goodness of their heart, their immediate response is, that's terrible. But that's a judgment about how it's going to be. Well, I ain't taking that on board. So my friends that know me, and the really wise ones, when I said I have a cancer diagnosis, they'd say something like, oh, so how is that for you? And then I'd explain. And I understand because in the past, when someone's told me they have cancer, I've probably done the same thing. Oh gosh, that's horrible. Well, it's not there because that's a judgment. It's a curse, and I'm not taking on anybody else's curse. So, but also, I had a 7-week treatment of radiation and chemo. Now, my last 40 years has been around natural healing, acupuncture, naturopathy, homeopathy, chiropractic, physiotherapy, breathwork, all kinds of stuff. Taking chemicals is so alien to my experience. But we had a choice to make. And my naturopath, who actually does liaise with oncologists and liaise with my oncologist, said, well, and my oncologist said this too, he said, you can wait and do whatever you want to do, but in 6 months' time, we can't guarantee you'll be in the same place because this could go quite fast. And my naturopath said, so, hit it hard, get it done, then use all the other things that I know, my network of natural healers to help support that. So that's the path that we went down. But for me to go down taking a whole bunch of chemical things and radiation was so far away, and it was like a hero's journey in a different. You're familiar with the term hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, etc. So this is like, how do I deal with this? And my boundaries was one thing I was very clear at. But I remember once, so it's like this. It's not a straight line. It's like a curvy, windy ball of wool that unravels. And there were times when I was struggling. And I remember once I was sitting out on the table on the deck here, and my partner Julie said to me, you can take charge of your own story. Because by the way I was looking, I was allowing my story not to be the one that I wanted. And so she was able to remind me, and we all need reminders. I need reminders. I'm pretty good, pretty disciplined, but sometimes, I would have radiation 5 days a week, which is like 15 minutes. It doesn't take long, but it sure does knock you out. And your blood's a whole bunch of things happen. The chemo I'd have once a week, and with chemo they give you steroids to deal with some of the side effects of the chemo. But the steroids had their side effects. So I'd have chemo on the Wednesday. On Thursday, I'm buzzing, I'm doing this, I've got so much energy because of steroids. Friday afternoon, I'm starting to go down like this because the steroids are now taking there. And I'm just having no energy. I'm a fairly high energy person. So to have my battery go down to like 5% was pretty hard. But I had to manage my emotional state, knowing that everything passes. All our emotions pass. Nothing stays forever. And with that awareness and that understanding, I go, okay, I'm feeling like crap, like shit right now. With throat cancer, swallowing becomes like swallowing razor blades.
Okay.
I lost my appetite. I didn't want to eat. I have to eat. If I don't eat, I'm going to die. They put a feeding tube into my belly, which is 20 centimeters of plastic tubing. So if I can't swallow, then at least they can feed me into my belly so I don't die. That is another story in itself. We probably don't have time for that. So every meal is actually a victory. If I get through it, it's a victory. Every poo is an absolute joy and a celebration because that gets to be a bit hard at times. In fact, that was one of the most challenging things, was being constipated for 4 days and knowing that what I was constipated with was a whole bunch of toxic things that my body desperately wanted to get rid of, but I wasn't going anywhere. Anyway, so going through all of this, all the things I've learned about being in the present moment. Oh, here's a tricky story for you. I have a throat diagnosis. They know it's here. They give me a PET scan that will show if it's anywhere else in my body. They had the PET scan on a Monday. I'm supposed to talk to my doctor on Wednesday. He gets COVID, so it's delayed till Friday. So I have 5 days of not knowing if it's just localized or if my body is riddled with cancer. And it was
Okay.
like I was tripping. Every day would be absolutely new. I went back to being a 5-year-old and looking at the world with absolute wonder. I didn't know when I spoke to someone if I'd be speaking to them in 2 months' time or a month's time. When I would look at a flower, I'd get so engrossed into the beauty of a flower or a leaf or a rock. It was like I'd been smoking dope or taking acid or something and just going, oh, all right, man. And I realized I was in an altered state of consciousness. I did not go and catastrophize what could happen. Let myself do that. Although there's lots of opportunity to do that. So I kept an absolute clear boundary on that. And so as I'm going through this trippy 5 days, I know I'm in an altered state of consciousness. And sooner or later, I'm going to go back to this is an ordinary day. So I want to find out what's the thing that makes this a trippy experience. And I discovered it. And it's about detail. If I go into the bush and I pick up a rock, and if I look at it, if I focus in on the detail, the whole world disappears except for that little bit of detail on that rock. And for me, it's detail. And I've discovered for other people it can also be the same. Detail can do that. So anyway, we get the phone call on the Friday, and there's nowhere else in my body. And that was just like the best present ever. So we're dancing around like we just won lotto. Now, we still had a long way to go. Not just the 7 weeks of treatment, it's the post-treatment. Because here's an interesting thing. The common story around cancer is the chemo. It has a cumulative effect. So over the 7 weeks, after that, it's still, the effect goes up because it's cumulative. And so the expectation was it's going to get worse around weeks 8 or 9 or 10. So this is the common narrative. And I go, okay, well, that may be the common narrative. It doesn't have to be mine. And so I'm going, well, what if it's not? What if it actually gets better? And lo and behold, I didn't go through that horrendous week 8 or 9 or 10. And the medical staff are going, you're amazing, Bill. You're doing exceptionally well. And one medical specialist said, in her 17 years of clinical practice, she'd never seen anyone manage the treatment and the recovery as well as I had. And I said, well, thank you for the compliment, telling me I'm amazing. Yep, I know that already. Cancer or no cancer. But what really is amazing is the structure, the system, that I have learnt through many, many years that I put into practice. Because I can, all of us, we can know something, but if we don't do anything with it, then you may as well not know it. And so it's the action that made the things different. So coming back to joy, if I can mention this, right at the beginning, I decided I wanted to heal through it and thrive from it. So not just go through it and be a survivor. I wanted to thrive from it, a cancer thriver. And I had no idea how that was going to show up. And now I've written 5 non-fiction books. And so Julie, my partner, said, so you're going to write a book on this, Bill. This is going to become a book. I'm going, no, yeah, well, maybe. But I decided not to write a book because the book, so this is one of mine, How to Be Bulletproof from Criticism. Someone could pick up the book and read it and put it down and not do anything with it. So we can become overread and underdone. And I did not want this to happen with all the gems that I'd learned, things that I'd taken for granted because I have done them for a long time. But what I take for granted, what you take for granted, things that you know, not everyone knows. So I wanted to have an experience with people where I could drip feed little bits of information. So when I was going through treatment, energy was at a premium. I didn't have very much. So if I gave someone a book this big that's going through cancer and said, read this and apply all that, well, no chance of that happening. So I'm going to drip feed curated information. And what I mean by curated is not everything that I know, but the things that are pertinent and relevant to someone going through a cancer diagnosis. And so that's what I've set up. My mission in life, if you like, is to take the things that I've learned and turn it into a system of process where people can challenge some of the things that they've been doing, but do it in a bit by bit way so they don't get overwhelmed and they keep on going. I want people, I'm passionately compelled, if you like, to take what I know and to make it workable for people. Because when I was in one of the waiting rooms, waiting for my treatment, see the doctor, and I'd see other people around me, and I could tell by their body language, by the little stories I'm hearing in their conversations, that they are not thriving. They are spiraling downwards. It's become a curse. It's become, oh, this is going to be the end of me. Don't read War and Peace. Get your things, all that kind of stuff. I'm going, I don't know what your diagnosis is, and no two cancers are the same, but I do know some stuff that you've probably not come across because you haven't had the training or the experience or the background to do that. And so part of my thriving was to help people to thrive from their own condition. Now, obviously, I can't help everyone, because I don't know what people's conditions are and what stage it is. But a friend of mine who had stage 4 prostate cancer, a 7-year journey that he'd been going through. I saw him outside one of the clinics and he said to me, and we were discussing what was going on. He said, Bill, this has been such a gift, such a blessing, I can't tell you. And I'm going, whoa, far out. I know some of the journey that he's been through. And if he can say it's a blessing, and he has turned it into a blessing, he's turned it into a huge blessing. I mean, his life has turned around upside down 180 degrees. But he has made something so beautiful and so useful to so many people from his experience, from his adversity. And, all through human history, we've had someone go through some kind of incredible adversity which you wouldn't wish on anyone. But they've taken this and they've been some gems and they've made diamonds out of this mush of coal that they've been going through. And what you're doing is you're helping for people to share their stories so other people go, oh, yeah, I could do that. I could do that a little bit. And it helps them go on their journey and maybe something that they do. So it's almost like, someone drops a stone, it creates a ripple in a pond. You never know where the ripple's going to go. And we don't have to be responsible for that. We just have to be responsible for our part, whether it's a pond or whether it's a stone or whether it's a little bit of the ripple.
That is definitely, I think, my calling, and where I find the most joy is to have a place for people to tell their stories because there are so many people, like you said, in this world who don't have the opportunity to learn certain things, or they may be going through similar experiences or hadn't thought about something through a different perspective that could greatly change their lives. And for me, I think the calling has always been that in the it's I have always said, my best friend has always said that the nicest people you will meet are those who have gone through great adversity.
Yeah,
And it's because they know what it feels like to struggle and to suffer, and they come out the other side saying, I'm going to use this.
yes,
I see the world for what it is for the first time. It's such a monumental change.
yeah,
So um I think for me, I know that so many people struggle with mental health, right? And I struggled with mental health for a really long time. And I never thought I was going to get out of it, ever. I thought that that was
mm,
just my life, right?
yeah,
And then I did the work. I changed this. And that's really what it is. I changed this. And that's why, what you're doing and what you've sent to me resonates is there. I think some people could listen to this conversation and maybe have a thought of, well, you can't just mindset yourself out of everything, right? Like, you know what I mean? There are other people that exist, but then there are others that are going to be open to, well, I haven't tried that. Like, I just sort of accepted that I am sad all the time, or I'm in
mm,
constant fear, or I have this diagnosis. I have not tried to go in and
yeah,
change that mindset. So, for people who are listening, you had mentioned earlier the difference between fear and fearing.
yes,
So, I want to just clarify that piece real quick. And then I want you also had mentioned two other things that I want to talk about. Um, the first instance and how we get to here. If we stop it here, we
yeah,
can change it. And then the piece that you said about what are you doing to yourself to become panic attacking. I think
yes,
that is that how you said that?
yeah, yeah. How are you doing, or how are you doing your anxiety or your fearing? And I use that language, and that really challenges people to go, well, what do you mean? I just felt it. No, well, before you felt it, how did you make yourself? How did you get to that place? And it's a sensitive conversation. So it's done with compassion and understanding. But also, the people don't know what they don't know. I don't know what I don't know.
Mm.
And sometimes when someone does know it, it's like give them a little bit and then another little bit and help them integrate that. So I'm going to go from here straight to there. Then maybe a journey of take this little bit of concept and idea, play with it in your own head, in your own mind, test it out. And don't take my word for it, but it's true. Check it out in your own experience and come back to me. But just that question, how do you do your fearing? I go, wow. And I'll get them to coach me. I'll say, okay, you coach me, show me, tell me the stuff that you do on the inside of your head. I'll do it and I'll see if it works. And say, okay, so the first thing is, well, you got to make a scary movie in your head. Well, okay, well, how do I do that? Oh, well, you take this and this and this and you put together and do it in such a way that's terrifying. Oh, okay, yep, I got that one. Yep, that's pretty scary. Now, you got to tell yourself something. It's not a quiet voice; it's a strident voice. Oh, okay, so and then by the end of it, I'm terrified. But then they know how they have done it, and the
So it's
whole thing goes way back to them being self-aware of what up until that point has been an unconscious process.
yeah,
And
and I
and
love
that
that
is
because
it is.
it's an accountability piece as well as being
Yes.
self-aware and
Yeah.
knowing that you can there it doesn't I have anxiety all the time. This is a part of my life that I'm accepted.
Yeah.
Whereas it doesn't control me. I don't allow it to control me anymore
Yes.
because resiliency in history has told me that my anxiety is rooted in lies, for
Yeah.
one. And two, none of the crazy bad things actually ever happen,
Yeah.
right? They never happen. So that just, for me, I get my anxiety, I acknowledge it, and I'm like, okay, you're anxious, but I'm going to think of you as being
Yeah. Yeah.
excited today, and this is how we're going to proceed.
Yeah. And there's another thing that you can do with that. And one is, you said my anxiety. So rather than saying my anxiety, you could say I'm anxieting right now.
Say that again.
I'm anxieting right now. In other
I
words,
am anxiety right now.
I am anxieting, or I
Oh,
am
with
fearing.
ing. So I am anxieting right now.
Yeah, which puts it into a process, and it helps you put it into a process. Just hold for
Okay.
that thing. The other thing to do is to become aware of where in your body the response is coming from. And it's
My
often in the
stomach.
belly. It's often in the body and the front of the stomach, not the back, but the front of the stomach. And so,
Always in my stomach.
yeah. So it's kind of like your tummy is telling you, bring to your awareness that your head is doing something that's scary. Yep. So your body is warning you physically, hey, your head brain's doing the stuff again. You need to intervene here.
Okay. No, I like
Okay.
that.
So the other thing that you can do is to rub your tummy and talk to your belly like you would a child that's distressed. And you use very soft, calming words. You rub your belly clockwise and you say, hey, I'm here with you. I know that you're feeling some fearing right now, and I want you to know that I am here with you. And
I love this.
you talk to your body, and your body will go, thank you. And you can, we call it calm abiding, that we deliberately talk to our body. So when I was going through my treatment, before radiation, before chemo, I would talk to my body. I've been talking to my body for a long, long time. This is going way back 40 years, 45 years, my training in Gestalt therapy, which is very much integration. And so I'm used to this. It's something I'm highly skilled at doing. So before radiation, for example, I'd say to my body, okay, body, we're going to go through another round of this. And I don't know if you've ever seen the machine that they put you through. It's like a tunnel, and you go through, and it's, the ceiling is just like very close, and there's all these things that are going on. So if you don't know what it is, it can be a bit, for anyone who's claustrophobic, it could be like their worst nightmare. But I'm not claustrophobic. So I'm talking to my body saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. Before chemo, I tell my body, this is what's going to happen. At the end of the day, I'll check in with my body like I would a good friend and ask, so how's your day? What have been the things that have been upsetting? Is there anything that I can do for you? So I became a servant to my body. And I would talk to my body frequently, not only like in a meditative state, but as I'm walking around. If I could feel something that was putting me off balance, I would just check in with my body and say, hey, we'll get through this. It's challenging right now, but we've got a lot of skills between us. We're going to use them all. Sometimes we'll maybe slip, but there are people around that can support me. And we're going to get through this. We're not just going to heal through it. We're going to thrive from it. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but this is where we're going. And the tone of voice I would use would be soft, gentle, encouraging, truthful.
So for anyone listening at home who has the initial thought that this sounds a bit kooky or new age or whatever those feelings are, because I know that there's going to be people who will hear and have these feelings or thoughts, right?
Oh,
I want
absolutely.
to, so you're speaking from your personal experience and your work experience and everything that you've done in your life. Essentially, what you just said is exactly how I took myself Now, here's the caveat. I didn't talk to my body. So I've made notes to talk to my body when I'm
Mm-hmm.
anxious. So this is going to be something I'm going to try now going forward. But what you just described in showing kindness
Yeah,
to yourself, and we're going to get this through this together, and using words and tones that matches how you would speak to a child is how I changed part of how I changed my internal dialogue and created a person who loves and is proud of themselves,
yeah,
because I wasn't that person at 35.
yeah,
And so to hear you say that gives me goosies because, like, I did that.
yeah,
So for people who are home listening or thinking that it's kooky, it might sound kooky, but it works. It
absolutely, it
works.
works. It works. And
So
if you think about, our relationship with ourselves is the longest standing relationship we'll ever have. And how we treat ourselves, how we converse with ourselves, how we tell ourselves who we are and how we are is absolutely crucial. Some people, when I've been working with them and they tell me some of their internal dialogue, they treat themselves with such harshness, such brutality, such cruelty that they would never do to anybody else in their world. But they happily do it again and again and again and again to themselves. And they wonder why they're so freaking sick.
yeah,
It's because of what they're doing on the inside of themselves. And I've come through this myself. I haven't always been a happy unicorn chasing human being. I've done, but I've learned, and I've learned through pain that there's got to be a better way. And there's something that one of my mentors taught me many years ago. This is related to all the things we've spoken about, and it's one of my default programs, if you like. So what he said was this: he said, "Life is meaningless." And we're all a little bit shocked by this because we're on a program of self-discovery. He said, "Life means absolutely nothing." He said there are thousands and thousands of events in your life every single day, and every event means nothing. In and of itself, it means absolutely nothing. But human beings are compelled to put meanings onto every single thing that happens to them. I'm walking down the street. I see a friend that I know. I wave hello. They totally ignore me. Within milliseconds, I've said to myself, well, what's wrong with them? Why are they ignoring me? Is it something I said to them? Is it the way I look? Maybe they don't like me. Or maybe it's not just him. Maybe it's a whole bunch of friends of mine that don't like me. Oh gosh, maybe no one's ever liked me. God, maybe no one's ever liked me in my entire life. So we can take something small and innocuous and crank it up until it's like World War 12 in an instant. So he said, any meaning, every event has more than one meaning. Curse or a blessing is a very simple example. It could be a curse
mm,
or it could be a blessing. And whichever meaning that I choose becomes my reality. And the thing that he said next really rocked my socks off. He says, it doesn't matter if the meaning that you're making is true or not, because that can always be debated. He said, the key question is the meaning that you're making useful or not?
okay,
And this is something worth replaying, rewatching, re-listening to, taking notes of, because everything that happens to us is innocent, is meaningless, but we will place some kind of meaning on it. You get cut off in traffic, and so it's easy to turn into rage and make it into, the world is full of arseholes on the road and they should all be banned, blah, 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 and crank it up. Or that's one way of doing it. And that might be true if that person is driving. But it could also be, maybe they've just got a call, their wife's about to give birth for the first time. They're not in much of a hurry. So we don't know the truth of either of those meanings, but one will be more useful to our mental and emotional state than the other. And part of that challenging, remember we were talking about going from, a trigger to the full-on response, is us challenging the meanings that we're making out of the things that we are causing upset to ourselves and our body.
I like that.
And this I've used for the last 45 years, and I have to say it saved me years of therapy and counseling.
So whatever happens, we assign a meaning, which we know that we do this. I think I know that we do this. Anybody who I think is a bit self-aware know that they in some way assign a meaning to it. What I find really interesting there, though, is that we can consciously choose what the meaning is.
Yes.
If it's a blessing or a curse,
yep.
right? With practice, obviously, we're not going to, wake up tomorrow morning and be like machines. So we can assign that meaning, blessing or a curse, but assign it through the lens of what is useful to us as an organism, a complete holistic organism, food, like mind, gut, heart. How does that work?
Yeah.
So for me, the talking to my body thing, I'm going to try. The rubbing of the belly for sure. I want to try that.
Your body will absolutely love it. I can guarantee that. It will just
I can just imagine too, because like you think about the external component of if my best friend realizes I'm anxious and they're like, it's going to be okay, whatever you need, we're going to get through it. That really does help me. And I can talk myself off the ledge as well, but I've never did it in a body perspective. I'm always so focused on here, not the belly. But yet the belly is the big trigger that's always firing off and saying, drop, tuck, and roll, like you need to hide and all of those things. So I'm going to try that for sure.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to try as well the being conscious of assigning meaning and then using the one that is useful. I think that that's something that can be very powerful with practice.
Absolutely.
What I find fascinating is that, so essentially as we're closing this out, like you're explaining the assigning meaning and what's useful. And then if we listen or remember back to when you were talking about your journey through the diagnosis, and then you were doing that in real time when you were having your diagnosis and when you were going through, the treatment plan and the weeks 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
And you're deciding what the meaning is and how it's useful to you. And then the other part is the kindness to your body. So that was very much in play while you were going through that treatment. And so my question is how would you have fared? And we won't know this, right?
No.
This is just a question. So my thought is like, how would you have fared, or what would your experience have been if you weren't mindful, choosing the meaning, how it's useful, and employing your 45 plus years of experience to choosing to make it a blessing and thriving from it?
So if I hadn't had that experience and that training, I would have reverted to my default setting. And that was my mum was very good at worrying about things. So as a little kid, I'd pick up her habit and I would learn how to worry about stuff. And every time, let me just explain this with a story.
Okay.
When I'm doing public speaking and I'm talking about fearing, so I want people to have an experience of fear in the workshop. So I tell people that I'm going to pick someone to come up front. It might be 40, 50, 100 people around. And I'm going to ask them to either sing a song or recite a poem. As soon as I say that, you can see ripples of fear ring through the room. And I'll kind of drag it out a little bit. And I'll say, and of course people then attempt to be invisible. They look at whatever it might be. And so I've got somebody else who's going to pick someone. So in fact, with me, it's going to be a picker. So I've already primed them up what to do, and they're looking around. And as they walk towards a group of people, you can see the fear quotient go up. And then and then I'll pick someone and they'll come up and I'll say, because there will always be someone, yeah, pick me, pick me. So I'll ask, do you want to sing a song or recite a poem? And they usually go, I'll recite a poem. I'll say, is that scary for you? Go, well, no, not really. Okay, so I want you to sing a song. And they'll just go white. And then
Yeah.
at that point, I will say, hey, listen, you can go sit down. If you've got the courage to come up here in front of all these people, you don't need to do this exercise. And then I let people know that I'm not going to ask anyone to come up here and sing a song or recite a poem. And you can feel the relief go through the whole room. But what I want them to do is to feel what it's like in their body when you play a scary, shit, awful movie. Your adrenals, your kidneys, your nervous system, and your gut brain in particular. And the gut brain, by the way, in traditional Chinese medicine is known as the general. It's the protector. It's the one that's looking out for danger and becomes hypervigilant, can become hypervigilant. And so it looks for danger even if there isn't, and just in case there is. So it's our gut brain that does all this and fires off signals into the rest of our body of, beware, beware, beware. But that needs to come under the control of the heart. Anyway, so people then, and the audience are all shit scared, and then they've all been given the get out of jail card, which is the relief. But they have an experience of what it's like when we do that to our bodies. So if through that whole, I've got a lump here, and I did a whole bunch of anxiety and fearing and bringing it up, I would have stressed my body way more than it needed to. I would have overloaded my kidneys, my adrenals, my nervous system. They would have all been shot. So by the time I get to have the treatment, my body is subpar. And when I'm going through treatment, I'm cranking up the horror movies inside my head. I'm not helping my body deal with the chemical and the radiation overload that they're getting. So I know that. So I was very careful. I think maybe 3 times I allowed myself to go into scary movie bits, but then I'm going, whoa. I can feel the anxiety in my belly. I'm going, okay, let's not do that. So if I hadn't have done that, I would have been like a lot of other people in that waiting room. And you could just see the fear, the anxiety in their faces and their body language. And I don't know what would have happened to my body because I'm never going to go down that pathway. But I have seen the effect on other people, and it's not pretty at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think, knowing that the worry, the fear, the anxiety has physiological
Yeah.
repercussions. It doesn't help when you're about to go now zap your body with poisons,
No.
right? In a cancer situation, because that's what's happening. You're zapping
Yeah.
your body with poisons, so you're not giving your body the best it can get going into that.
No.
Now, for anybody listening at home too, I love that you did make the call out where you said there was a few times where you did allow the movie to happen, and I think that's really important too, because as we're striving to be better and to like work our brains and change our mindsets to process information better, have better internal dialogue,
Yeah.
we're going to trip up. We're going
Absolutely.
to have moments where we're going to reverse.
Yes.
But that's okay, because that's a part
absolutely.
of being human. So I think coming back and saying, okay, you know what, I had that trip up, but I'm gonna come back now, and I'm going to continue to keep myself in check. So today I think for everyone at home, mindset is super key in everything that we do.
Yeah.
That's a huge takeaway from this call. Remember that you are anxieting.
Yes. You're doing
I like that.
anxiety. You're doing
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yes. And and you can be fearing
Yes.
as opposed to I am having fear.
Yeah. Indeed. So it's
Okay.
taking ownership of it. It's taking
It's the
ownership of the process.
And it makes it a process as opposed to a part of your identity. That's
Yes.
how I'm reading it as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're not
Absolutely.
accepting that you are having anxiety, you're accepting that you're going through the process of anxiety. I like
So when
that a
someone
lot.
says, for example, I'm an anxious person, that's them telling them how they have to be in life, rather than, at the moment, I'm doing a bit of fearing and I'm doing a bit of anxiety. That's a whole different ballgame.
I like this. I like that a lot. Also, I think we should all try, everybody who's listening, the technique for talking to our bodies.
Yes.
Because I do know that it works because I've lived it as well. The talking to my belly specifically, that's going to be a very interesting, but I'm really excited to actually try. So like now I need something that's going to make me feel get in the process of anxietying to then talk to my body and check in with it and make sure it feels safe and that we're going to go through this together. So I really want that to happen. You have books out, so I will link your books and any of your social media also when I put this out. You can find Bill on Facebook at bill.lee.emery, Emery. Okay. Definitely go check out his Facebook and his LinkedIn. And then I do have one question. The Thriving After Cancer, it says brand new program starting soon.
Yes.
So when is this starting? And then how does people get involved with it?
Okay. So the website is thrivingaftercancer.info.
Okay.
And that's a monthly membership. So I'll be drip feeding bits of information so people don't get overwhelmed. And that will be launched within a week. So I'm just getting all the ducks in a line and all the little dots and dotted and T's crossed. But that should be live very, very soon. And that'll
it's
be
quite an undertaking to launch something like that as well, because you want it to be
realize
perfect.
how much it was before the done.
There's a lot of work, especially if you want it to be something that you feel is a direct reflection of what you have to offer, right?
Yeah.
So I love that. So it's a monthly membership. So I will post that as well. If you're someone who's going through cancer diagnosis and through the treatment plan, and you just need some extra guidance on how to navigate the mindset of it, I want you to check it out. I want you to head over there. So it was thrivingaftercancer.info.
Yep.
It'll be live within the next week, so keep an eye out for that. Bill, it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Anytime you want, Mike. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
So
everything.
I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Like I said, very grateful that you came on the show today.
Yep.
For everybody that's either listening at home or watching, check the descriptions. You'll get all the links for everything there. And thank you again for tuning in to Poddin My Noggin.